the Age of Fission radio show with your host, Lonnie Clark. We stand together and accept that we now live in a world transformed by Fukushima. From 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here on UCY.TV radio. We relentlessly engage every ear that listens. We expose and confront the complete lack of accountability for the nuclear industry. Consider social engineering programs who view our bodies, minds, and souls as assets on a balance sheet. We discuss vital current issues, interview activists, and engage our audience in an effort to allow all voices to be heard. The Age of Vision radio show creates a venue that all will choose. We encourage our listeners to reclaim their power and their courage to take action and save our planet from the ravages of greed and indifference. Our actions matter. Every voice matters. We remind our listeners that happiness is resistance. Love is greater than fear.
Good morning. I hope everybody is well. My name is Jerome, and I am the Sane Environmentalist. Welcome to the Age of Fission radio show for the 10th of May, 2018. I wanted to start out today's show with an actual proper shout-out and to talk about what we're doing here, why we're trying to do this, and the methods that we try to employ in order to do it. So what we're trying to do, the whole goal, on my part at least, of the Age of Fission radio, is to educate and inspire people to take action against this nuclear monster which is destroying utterly destroying our existence, and will continue to do so unless we take absolute and affirmative action. There are a growing number of people who really believe this and know this in their hearts, and they are an inspired bunch, and people who educate themselves about it and begin to understand what is this thing, this radiation, what does it do, how does it work, I don't know, it's this amorphous thing. They talk about it, but you can't see it or feel it or what, or you don't know if you're affected by it, and so how can you be mad about it? And that's the scary part right there. It is, if you don't understand it, then you can't be scared about it, okay? We hear, for instance, cesium. You hear cesium-137, okay. Well, principally, that's the same as regular non-radioactive cesium in its properties, and its chemical properties. The experiment, I talked about this yesterday, that a guy did with some metallic cesium that had to be shipped in a special ampule with a hydrogen or argon atmosphere in the ampule, because it literally explodes, and it's liquid at room temperature in the atmosphere. And it will literally just, as soon as it hits the atmosphere, it just, boom, explodes into its smallest possible oxidized state and becomes tiny airborne cloud of particles. And I imagine those particles will settle on water, on everything, and they'll float in the air for a long time. So cesium is the same thing, but it's airborne, and it's, people don't understand how that works. Strontium, it's the same, it has similar properties, that are basically, they're explosive in oxygen. They oxidize readily. They're so unstable they attach themselves to oxygen molecules right away to try to stabilize themselves, but they're still splitting apart. Plutonium metal. Most people don't understand anything about plutonium metal. They see a disc, a silver disc, and they're like, "That's plutonium metal." Okay, little hockey puck thing. Well, it is, but you know what would happen if you put that plutonium metal on a bench somewhere in the air? It would burn. It would literally burn, and it would turn into a powder, like a slower motion cesium reaction is the only thing I could say. But basically, plutonium burns, and then after about a period, like grows by 700% or something like that, or 70%, huge amount, and then it turns into a white powder, and it floats away in the air. That's how plutonium acts in the atmosphere. People don't understand this, what we're dealing with here. And I think that they need to be educated. And that brings us back to our shout out for this morning, which is that to get our voices out, I've found that YouTube to be pretty effective. I can usually reach 100 or 200 people on YouTube. And on some videos that I've done, I'm amazed. My updated Fukushima video on YouTube is at like 16,000 views and growing. So that's pretty amazing to me. I'm just blown away sometimes. It was at 10,000 2 weeks ago. So there is interest in this. If you hit the right button, if you hit the right ear, if you get the right angle, the right chord, whatever you want to call it, then you can reach a bunch of people. I have reached probably overall 20,000 people with my message about the Fukushima disaster and the significance of it and how we need to take action to prevent that from continuing and prevent it from happening again here in the United States. Because just one of these old, ancient, decrepit power plants goes, just one of them. And there's almost 100 of them. So at any rate, Peaceworks Radio hosts our program, I believe, 2 days a week. And I think that if I wanted to, I could get a show on Peaceworks Radio. It's called Eugene Peaceworks, KEPW, 79.3 FM in Eugene, Oregon. It is a fairly small 100-watt transmitter, and it's a local, not-for-profit, wide open. They try to serve underserved areas of the community that are underserved on the FM spectrum. They do eclectic things that only certain underserved people would appreciate, and that's okay, and the rest of us understand that. And I think that's a good thing that we are able to host radio that is in interest to different people for different interests, because the world is a diverse place, and we need to keep diversity in the center of that. And, with the exception of things nuclear, I think we need to disdain from them. All of the issues, all the problems, all the health. There's over 1 million people, I bet, in the world that have been sickened or given cancer because they worked at nuclear facilities. They say that 4 out of 10 people, especially in the old days, guys that are retired and dying, they're pretty much dying off now, and now they're starting to come out and say, well, we found that there's an excess of cancer, but the government goes into it's devilishly tricky. This is what the government said. Epidemiology is a devilishly tricky undertaking, even in the best of circumstances. So the government is siding on the side of it doesn't. Just because all these people have cancer, maybe they'll be like, maybe what it is they're depressed from working at a nuclear facility, and so they drink and smoke more. I don't know. Because they've all got colorectal cancer. Oh, that's the first one you get from radiation. Ooh, well, oops. Let's see. Workers at atomic weapons factory making uranium for nuclear bombs died at significantly younger ages and suffered a higher incidence of lung, intestinal, and blood cancers than their overall peers in the United States as a whole. So I think Lonnie Clark is messaging me, which causes my phone to totally mess up, so she needs to not do that anymore. If she can try to. So at any rate, KEPW 97.3 Eugene, Oregon. Check them out. They've got a website as well that you can go to. So a brief Google search will get you to them. Thank you for hosting our show, by the way. So another... Am I down? What the heck's going on? No, it acts like I'm up. My phone microphone's on. Looks like everything's okay. I don't know what's up. My phone's seems like I start hitting a good point and then Skype all of a sudden cuts out, doesn't it? So the government says one thing, but then the medical records come back years later and you realize that most of these people died young, they died early, they died of cancer of the esophagus and throat, so they were ingesting particles. That's how you get that, you know. Lung, intestine, blood. So, well, you know, what can you do? What can you do? You can not work at a nuclear plant. You cannot support that. Go in there with an understanding that it probably is going to kill you. Know that if you're the guy putting on that weird yellow suit with the face mask and the oxygen hose, even with that, there's a good chance that you're going to be dead after that. It will cause you to die younger in some way, shape, or form. And that is the kind of the hideous thing about it. And so that's over 1 million people who have been affected. 1 million have at least over the world, especially in places like North Korea. I bet you there's 80%. They probably have a lot of people that literally just die from radiation poisoning. Think about how primitive the North Koreans' program must be and how they must not even think twice about safety of their workers or their citizens. Very little. If they're willing to blow up a mountain right there, and North Korea is not that big, then you know for a fact that their program has just killed the workers there. So it probably sucks to be a North Korean nuclear worker. Even in the engineering section, it's probably deadly. You know, and here we're careful about it, quote unquote, but still the stuff gets out. It has a way of getting out. It will always get out. That's the thing about radiation. It will always get out. And unless it's the only way to get rid of what we have here now, then I would totally am against this whole idea of splitting atoms. You know, and the more I study it, the more I realize that it seems to me, I was thinking about how the heck did humanity come up with the concept of the atom of this? How did we come up with that? They say that Einstein thought it up. He thought about matter and space and time. Newton and those guys talked about gravity. But we went from that to actually envisioning what an atom is. Okay, really envisioning what an atom is. Including its subparts, including the parts of the parts. We went from magnetism to understanding the atomic structure of matter very quickly as a species. It was in some ways, our technology, I feel, was fed to us as a species. These quote-unquote discoveries may not be by us after all, in some ways, because magnetism led to electricity. But still, how do you understand what you're doing with electricity, or what that electricity could be used? I'll magnet on one end and then get it to another end, but how to understand that you're conducting electrons through there and understanding actually how that works. And, that was the first thing they taught us in basic electronics, was how electrons move energy through matter, through solid matter, right through it. And some do and some don't, and some do more or less. And they call those semiconductors. So it is fascinating, and it fascinates my mind to think about it, but I still have to wonder, how do we get there? How do we understand that it's all about, that everything is a particle and a wave? I guess that was Einstein, huh? Who came up with the idea that everything is energy. It's just put together differently. And everything is composed of a particle or a wave. And most things are a particle and a wave. They're a wave until they interact with something, at which point they kind of become a particle. That's my understanding of how radiation works. Radiation is basically a particle, but it's moving like a wave. It's going up and down. It's in an actual way, depending on the temperature of it. The higher the temperature, the greater the wavelength. The lower the temperature, the less the wavelength. In the case of a neutron, for instance, I looked up neutron temperature today, and it was kind of an interesting read. I guess maybe you might want to follow along. We're going to delve in and take a left turn right into the world of science. So the neutron detection temperature, also called neutron energy, and I talked about this yesterday with those fast reactors versus the slow reactor. So this will kind of fill that out, let's say. People will have a better understanding of what we're talking about with a fast neutron versus a slow neutron. So it indicates a free neutron's kinetic energy, usually given in electron volts. The term temperature is used since hot, thermal, and cold neutrons are moderated in a medium with a certain temperature. The neutron energy distribution is then adopted to the Maxwellian distribution, known for thermal motion. Qualitatively, the higher the temperature, the higher the kinetic energy of the free neutron. The momentum and wavelength of the neutron are related through the de Broglie relation. The large wavelength of the slow neutron allows for a large cross-section. So a slow neutron has a greater wavelength. Okay. So the faster the neutron, the shorter the wavelength. And there's a proportion to the de Broglie relation. So that's interesting. So basically, neutrons can go from a cold neutron, alrighty, which is 0 to 0.025 electron volts, and those are basically just a loose particle, to what they call a thermal neutron, okay, and that's what they use for neutron capture in pretty much all nuclear reactors today. Just about all of them, unless they're using MOX fuel, and then they're probably using a combination or some crazy thing. But that's mostly what they use, is thermal neutrons. And then you got fast neutrons, okay? Thermal neutrons is 0.025 electron volts. A fast neutron is 1 to 20 million electron volts. Much higher energy level. Much faster. And it even breaks it down as to the speed. A thermal neutron goes at 2.2 kilometers per second. That's the speed of it as it flies through the universe. I can only call it through time and space because it goes into whatever it's aimed at. And let's see, we got a fast neutron, okay, goes at 14,000 kilometers per second or higher. So we go from, with the slow neutron, a thermal neutron goes 2.2 kilometers per second, and a fast neutron goes 14,000 kilometers per second. That's why, that's the difference. And so the fast neutron is less likely to hit anything because it's just whipping along so fast. If it hits you, well, that's unfortunate, but there is actually a possibility it could go through your body without interacting with any atoms. There is a what should I call it? A percentage chance, because every so many atoms, and the higher the speed of the neutron, the less it's going to interact with atoms, I would think, because they just can't. It just going too fast. Just can't. It just whips through them. It might leave a hole. I'll have to study that more, but that's kind of how it feels to me, you know. But these fast neutrons, if the temperature of the material is too high, then I guess everything's jumping around even more than normal, and so even a fast neutron can't strike if it's dense enough material. I think it is a lot dependent upon the density of the material that the neutron is going through and the type of material. See, that's what the carbon is for, or the water is for in nuclear reactors, is they actually slow down these neutrons enough to where the neutrons are going now a very small percentage of the speed they were, and then they're able to glom on to these uranium atoms and make them heavy and cause them to both fission and to make plutonium, which then fissions, because 10% of the reaction that goes on in any nuclear chain reactor is plutonium fission, because it creates plutonium and then it fissions it, and that's kind of what the traveling wave reactor is about. I really need to study that more, but if we started from scratch with that might be better, because that kind of doesn't make a whole lot of waste, and it just uses raw uranium. Pretty clever, you know, but I guess we had to get here from there, and there is a real mess. We have a real mess, folks, you know. So these fast neutrons have a higher rate and therefore a smaller cross-section. And that means that they're less likely to hit another atom as they're going through time and space, because they're going through time and space as a wave and a particle. And they travel as a wave until they hit something, and then they become a particle, and then they bounce off of that, and after ionizing it, and continue on their way, dependent on their speed. A slow enough neutron will just glom onto the first thing that it comes in contact with. If that first thing happens to be a uranium-238, then it will become uranium-239, and then I think americium, and then plutonium at that point. So, and it releases its own little shower. Everything always releases a little shower. So that's what the difference between a fast and a slow neutron. You know, think of them as things shot out of a slingshot. If you shoot something slower and closer, you're more likely to hit it than if you shoot it farther and faster. But if you hit it from farther and faster, well, you get much more effect than you do from slower and closer. So that's kind of the whole idea behind the kinetic energy of the neutron. So that was an interesting side note, I would hope. And now let's talk about, speaking of all of this, fuel cycle facilities. Let's talk about all this fast neutron fuel they're going to be needing to generate, which will have to be high in plutonium, very high in fissionable material. So the actual percentage of fissionable material in any given fuel bundle will be higher because it's a fast neutron collision. And so you got to densely pack your atoms together, probably pretty much closer to criticality just because of their closeness to each other is what it is. You're almost critical. And then you give it a little bombardment from the outside and it just kind of fizzles and reacts. I kind of feel like that's how fast neutrons work. And then they create their own fast neutrons. Once you get them fissioning, then they start their own. Then basically as the plutonium fissions, then it produces its own fast neutrons, which will cause other neutrons in the district to fission as well. So there's actually a good chance that you will not get a whole bunch of random radiation as much as you would in a slow moderated reactor. I think you might get less actual radiation because it's consuming it all. It's the core itself is sucking up the spare neutrons. So before they can get out. But I'm not really positive if it goes from the inside out or outside in, or if the whole thing is like a fuel bundle. But they're going to need to create these things. They're going to need to create these fire sticks somewhere. And I'm looking at the NRC's map of fuel cycle facilities. And we got a big E in the northwest. And that would be the REVA, Uranium Fuel Fabrication Facility in Richmond, Washington. AREVA, that is not the United States government, I doubt. And then we got another uranium enrichment gas centrifuge facility in Idaho, in Idaho Falls. You know, those are the places that are going to get targeted. If you think about it, in a nuclear attack, they're going to target our biggest nuclear facilities. So if you're near a big nuclear facility, I don't know. You got another gas centrifuge in New Mexico and a bunch on the East Coast. Here's a MOX facility. Here's where they're making that. In South Carolina. Areva. Let's see, we got another, that's 2 MOX facilities. And this is Areva again. They've got 2 MOX facilities in 2 states. Uranium fuel enrichment. Global Nuclear Fuel. Fuel Americas, LLC. Are you hearing all these corporate names? Every single one of them. And I'm reading them all intentionally because I want everybody to kind of start to understand something as we go along. Here's another uranium enrichment facility. They're just all over the East Coast. BWXT Nuclear Operations Group, Lynchburg, Virginia. Uranium fuel fabrication, so they make the rods there. And then up here we've got a gas centrifuge. And it looks like it is in Piketon, Ohio. So they're creating plutonium in a gas centrifuge. And Areva again. So Areva, there you go. So we've got, start to see a pattern, folks. As I go through here, as I pull up actual official documents and look at websites that are nrc.gov/info-finder/FC. Get you right to this page, and it's just a simple map. You know, they got one laser separation facility, whatever the heck that is, Hitachi Global Laser Enrichment, LLC, Limited Liability Corporation. Why would we let a limited liability corporation be in charge of something as libelous as nuclear fuel enrichment. So this is, and I encourage everybody to go to the USNRC website and look around. Be active, make a comment, report a safety concern. Everybody should be reporting San Onofre. Yeah, there's a problem. San Onofre is a problem. Report it. There's a connection right there on the upper right-hand corner. It says report a safety concern. You can do that. There's lists of public meetings and ways to get a hold of them and become integrated and involved and get government back to what it needs to be. We need our government to take responsibility for our nuclear program. And they may act as if they are taking responsibility for it, but they're not. We gave them responsibility, and now they're subdividing that out to other vendors who at the lowest bid. And these vendors are time and again ripping them off and going, well, we need more money and more money and more money, and all the money that we could have spent now on the actual problem has been spent in their whole thing. And they poison the workers. That's part of the deal too, is they poison the workers. And I know that they continue to, because I understand this stuff and I know it gets out. There's no safe way to use a glove box. There's really no safe way. You cannot work with these materials and not get affected by it. I don't care what you put between you and the material. If your hand is on the material, that's it. You've now crossed the threshold, and eventually you're going to get a dose. It only takes once, and that's what I think a lot of people don't understand. One quick, tiny flash, just a little tiny flash. And then 2 or 3 hours later, oh, God, I feel kind of sick. Oh, God, I'm going home. And is that a sunburn? Wow. And then a couple of days later, you feel better and you get better and you go back to work and you don't realize you've undergone internal DNA damage now. And I'm sure that happens quite often. Oh, he got flashed. There's probably even got a name for it. Okay. Dose, something dirty, mucked up. What is the name for it? He got mucked up. Yeah, that's a good thing, because you can clean muck off. And just clean it off. Make sure you wash your hands with soap and water. That's what they told my grandparents. That's fine. It's fine. Wash your hands with soap and water. As they dusted the eating table off, literally with uranium dust on it. These poor people. Before we had the ability to understand, and before we had the ability to communicate. Now we have the ability to understand and the ability to communicate. So let's do that. Let's communicate. Let's communicate starting with the NRC. Report a safety concern. Do that. So another interesting NRC page, which I look at daily, is called the Current Power Reactor Status Report. And the Current Power Reactor Status Report gives you a list of all the reactors in the United States that are running and at what percentage of power they're running at. A very simple chart, unit/power. I find this interesting because you can see which ones go into refueling mode, which ones are shutting down, which ones are maybe sickly, and they can only run them at like 50 or 40% or 30%. Anytime I get between 15 and 30%, I think that's a sick power plant. Why is it on? That should be shut down. If you can only get 15% power out of something, it needs to be shut down. And these are as reported by the facility. And this chart right here is as of May 10th, 2018 at in the morning. I'm not exactly sure what the hour is, but it was this morning. So units of concern today are Beaver Valley at 15%. Where's Beaver Valley 1 and Beaver Valley 2? Beaver Valley 2 is at 100%. So I don't know if Beaver Valley is shutting down for perhaps maintenance. The Jenna plant is, no, Hope Creek 1 is down to 3%. Some of them are shut down. That's good. 93% at Susquehanna 1. So they're not getting 100%. 87% at Browns Ferry 3. Browns Ferry 1, 2. 1 is 100, 2 is 0, 3 is 87%. So they're getting, what, a percentage of what they should be getting output. Probably Browns Ferry 2 is probably shut down for refueling or reconditioning. That one, it sounds like it needs to be shut down and taken care of and disappeared. I'm actually going to do a quick search for Browns Ferry and see exactly. Browns Ferry Nuclear Plant. It is in Alabama, right on a river. Commission date, 1974, 1972, and 3 were 1975 and 1977. So that's been operating for 40 years about. Tennessee Valley Authority, notoriously bad power company. 1,000 megawatt capacity. Yes, this is one of the ones I think that needs to shut down. And I'm looking and seeing a large amount of spent fuel. And you're going to find that at every single one of these power plants. You're going to find a huge amount of spent fuel. Also, I'm seeing 3 reactors stacked up right next to each other with this one. So 3 reactors stacked right up next to each other is, if one of them goes, what are you going to do with the other 2? You know, how are you going to, that's just silly. There you go. Let's put them all in one big containment. Yeah, save a few bucks. See, what would be the best idea? To put each one in its own separate containment. If something goes wrong, and if it's a good enough containment, it'll contain it. If, for the most part, something will always get out. Keep that in mind with radioactivity. But 3 of them in one big building means that if one of them goes bad and radiates the entire place, you can't get workers to the other 2. And you can't isolate the one completely. It's a horrible design idea. That's a design idea, that it was designed to save money. Okay? More efficient. It's more efficient to have a single containment structure for all 3 reactors, right? We'll just make it extra thick. You know, and there's no containment structure on the planet that will stop a General Electric Mark I reactor, which is probably what these are, something similar to that, from going red and melting and exploding. You know, because when they melt, they kind of explode because of the hydrogen gas, because of the Zirc alloy, because they apparently didn't think that went through real well. Well, let's clad them with a material that will actually become explosive if it melts in air. But only if it mixes with steam. Oh, good thing there'll be no steam. And it isn't funny. It isn't funny. It's idiocy. Why would you not think that through and go, well, okay, in the event that a reactor goes dry, this could make things much, 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 much worse. This could breach containment. This metal that we clad the rods with could be the thing that actually breaches containment. And yes, in Fukushima, it was. The cladding. Okay, the reason that Fukushima breached the way it did was because the cladding on the fuel rods melted, interacted with steam in the air, and produced hydrogen gas, which created very large explosions. Okay, that's how it breached containment. Otherwise, you would have had a melted core somewhere in there, and nothing really got out if you have a good containment structure. Now you have a melted core, but if you did the containment right, the melted core will sit right inside the containment for, if you built it right, for the next million years. Okay, but we of course aren't going to do that. We're going to build a single containment for 3 of them. What could go wrong, right? We're right on a river, and I see this plant is sitting maybe 10 feet above. You know, if you had a titanic rain that occurred, this place would flood. And this is what? Brown's Ferry. So yeah, Brown's Ferry. Like I said, understanding that we got 3 reactors in one building, one's humming at 100%, the other's off, and the other's going at 87%, which probably means it's at the end of the cycle or something crazy like that. 2% at Harris. Here's a real touchy one, 50%, and that is Hatch 2. Hatch 2 power plant. Let's find out if we can find that one. I doubt we can. I'd be very surprised if we can find the Hatch 2 power plant. But maybe we can. No. Hatch 2 power plant. Maybe we can find it. Let's find out. There it is. Edward L. Hatch Nuclear Power Plant in Braxley, Georgia. There they are. They're all in Georgia, South Carolina. General Electric boiling water reactor. Capacity of 1,848 megawatts. That would be 4 of those small reactors. So they could replace that one big reactor with 4 smaller ones in the same containment structure. That's what they're doing. And they're going to use fast neutrons instead of slow neutrons. Is this making sense now? Now I can say this and you really kind of get it, don't you? You understand when I say they're going to use fast neutrons, what I'm talking about. It's a different process. It's just a different thing. It is still splitting atoms, just in a different way. So it looks like subsidy of Southern Company. Hatch's owners are Georgia Power, Oglethorpe Power Corporation, and the Municipal Power Authority of Georgia. 2 emergency planning zones, one at 10 miles and one at 50. Spent nuclear fuel is stored on-site in concrete casks. The Hatch plant, a boiling water reactor near Braxley, Georgia, is estimated by the Department of Energy, as of this year, to have generated 1,446 metric tons of spent fuel. That's one reactor. Seismic risk. 1 in 454,000 per year. So the roll of the dice is 1 in 454,000 for a seismic event that could cause core damage. And keep in mind, look at this place. This is probably no different. Let's see if I can blow it up. That's a big image. All right. There it is. It's on a river out in the middle of the forest. So this whole area around here would just be a no-go zone again. Another no-go zone. How many of those are we going to allow on our planet before we finally get tired of it, folks? You know, how many of us are going to have to die? How many people that are indoctrinated into the nuclear industry as far as being a worker? You know, the people that do it for the money. You know, an individual who's a good guy in the community. He's got a family. He's got ties to the community. Every time he sees a homeless guy, he gives him $1. He buys people sandwiches and coffee, and he's a good person. Grows organic food, eats organic. He just happens to work as a fuel handler at a nuclear power plant. And that's what he does. He works in a crane and sits in a bucket with the suit on and moves fuel around all day. That's what he does. And somebody's got to do it. And my God, he makes $150,000 a year. So nice house. He's making a lot of money. He's not even college educated. And he's making $150,000 a year because he learned how to operate a crane as a kid because his dad had a warehouse over there in San Antonio or something like that. And there's your typical average American nuclear worker. And there's just a guy. And he's working a crane and he's doing a job. And in many, many cases, you could not convince this person that they're not doing the right thing. It's like, well, I'm eating healthy and my kids are healthy and I'm healthy. I jog 3 miles a day every morning before I go to work. I don't see what you're talking about. And right now in his life or her life, then yeah, that's fine. But then what happens? And hopefully now we're better at it than we used to be. I know that we are better at it than we used to be. They don't sweep uranium dust off of tabletops to sit down and eat anymore. Thank God for that. But still, especially when you're dealing with fast neutrons, if any of those get out and they interact with your atoms, they do a lot of damage. When a fast neutron interacts with another atom, it bashes the heck out of it. It really does. They're going very, very, very fast. What is that, 144,000 kilometers per second? Close to the speed of light. A third of the speed of light is how fast a fast neutron goes. That's how fast that thing's whipping off of there. It blows apart with that much speed. That's what happens when you split an atom. It literally spits out bits of itself, and those bits are radiation. And you think to yourself, well, if it's a bit, how can it be radiation? That doesn't make any sense. But it is radiation. Basically the bits have so much energy that they have a wavelength, if you will, and they travel at this wavelength through time and space. And if they hit matter as they're traveling through time and space, and the cross-section of the matter is correct, then they will interact with the matter. If the cross-section isn't right, they will go right through the matter. And that is radiation. And they will stay a wave until they interact with something, at which point they become a particle. It's like in water. If you look at a wave coming out from far away, you can't see it. It's not until it gets right to the shore and starts to interact with the earth, with the shore, that you start, oh, okay, wow, look at that. Boom, that's big, huh? Well, you couldn't see it before. Well, the reason you couldn't see it is because it is a wave. It hasn't interacted with anything yet. That's a good way to look at what a neutron does. It basically goes through. And light is the same way. Light doesn't become a thing until it bounces off of something, until it hits something, it gets absorbed by it or reflected by it. Light travels along as a wave, you can't see it, and then it hits something and ping, it becomes a thing, and then it bounces off. And then it gets to your cornea and goes ping and becomes something and bounces off. If you have blue eyes, the blue light bounces off. If you have brown eyes, probably you absorb a lot more of the light into your eyes than another person that has blue eyes, for instance. But that's the nature of light. And then boom, it's a wave again. It has so much energy, it doesn't stop no matter what you do. So we got 10 minutes here. And interesting that I wish there was a way that I could, anybody who hears this, please do me a favor, shoot me an email at hebertjerome@gmail.com. And just pop me a message and say, gotcha, heard you, whatever. If you've got a minute or you're at a device and you hear me, do that. I really wish there was a way that I could get my demographics and get an understanding of who hears this show. because I have no idea. I've said it more than once that I feel like I'm basically preaching to the choir. I'm literally preaching to the choir, and I hope that there are people that are listening, and I hope that there are people who are affected in a positive way by this. So, nuclear weapon maintenance. That's something I think that I need to do some. What sort of maintenance do nuclear weapons need? I would imagine, in my opinion, given the nature of, and I need to talk to, you did an interview with Lonnie Clark, and I need to interview this guy, because he called into question my thoughts that they need to recertify, if you will, the plutonium triggers that they're using in their warheads, that they lose enough plutonium because they keep it really close to the edge because of weight. And so they have to have the minimum amount, the absolute minimum amount that you can have and get a decent critical chain reaction that will set off the hydrogen fission device that they're creating. So if every layer, so basically an atomic bomb or a nuclear bomb is basically a layer, like a layered sandwich of different things, that do different things as the reaction moves through them, both a fission and a fusion reaction. The fission sets off fusion, which sets off fission, which sets off more fusion. So in the end, in any nuclear warhead, you get 4 actual reactions out of this single packet. And so each part of that packet has to be perfectly, exactly right. If it isn't, it won't go off. It'll either blow it apart before it has a chance to react. That's a big problem. Does it blow itself apart before it can finish reacting and spread plutonium and other parts of the bomb all over the place, or does it actually all react, which creates a huge, gigantic, enormous amount of energy? Which is the difference between dynamite and a nuclear. A ton of dynamite versus a ton of nuclear explosion. There's a big difference there. They may do the same shock energy, kinetic energy, but nuclear does way more damage. So these weapons need to be cared for very carefully. Plutonium-based cores, the core compromises the main fissile material used to induce fission and a nuclear explosion. It's primarily enriched uranium, which is produced from concentrated and centrifuges. So it's not plutonium, but uranium that they're using in weapons today. Interesting. This is off of Quora.com. But this guy is smart, and he's talking about the difference in submarines and ICBMs. But yeah, I'm thinking that what these bombs, basically, you have to recondition them. You have to periodically pull them apart. You have to test them, because you don't know that the core is undergoing evolution. That pit in the middle is undergoing evolution, basically. If it ever gets exposed to air, it's done. Okay? As soon as that pit's exposed to air, it's going to turn into powder, like I mentioned a little while ago. So theory, plutonium is a good source of alpha particles. Alpha particles react with beryllium-9 and release a neutron. The problem, the half-life of polonium-210 is 138 days, which means within 138 days, 50% of the polonium would no longer be useful for neutron initiation. And within 414 days, 87.5% of polonium would be useless. Solution: continuous production of plutonium-210 is required, and neutron initiation has to be replaced frequently. However, uranium-235, 233, and plutonium-239 are relatively stable. They don't decay faster. Also, lithium deuteride is a fuel for thermonuclear weapons and is very reactive and should not be allowed to come in contact with air. Right. So basically, they do have to test this stuff. They do have to double check it and rebuild the whole thing, because it is a part and parcel of itself. Each layer is each one of these things is kind of a work of art in its own self, in a horrifying way, what they're doing. If there was a way to harvest the energy from just one of these weapons, completely harvest the energy, set it off inside a sphere or something and harvest all the power that comes off of it, you would have you'd be able to power the whole planet on one of them for a year. That's how much energy is released from a typical megaton size weapon, all at once. So, folks, it's find me at YouTube. I am Hebert Jerome, or at gmail.com, and again, please email me. And as well, I am the Sane Environmentalist on YouTube, and I call myself the Sane Environmentalist because what I'm dealing with is absolutely insane. That we could have an issue where people can get away with this kind of thing. That people can inflict this upon their fellow human beings. How do we allow this to continue? How do we not pay any attention to it? It's like this thing that isn't a thing, but it needs to be a thing. So today we learned about neutrons. That's good. We learned about fission and how neutrons are like glue. They stick to things, and when they do, they interact with them and change them. If they're going fast enough, they can knock parts off of them and create new particles and continue on their way. But if they're going slow enough, they glom on easily to other things. And when they do, they make other things more massive, and that causes oftentimes those things to break into two because they can't hold the weight of the extra mass that they've absorbed. So, Lord of mercy, Lord of mercy. So at any rate, again, please, if you're in Eugene, Oregon, please tune in to Eugene Peaceworks, KEPW at 97.3 FM. We 100% support them. Of course, UCY.TV, and Jules for her tireless work. Thank you very much, Jules. We appreciate everything that you do. We really do. And as well, my partner, Lonnie Clark. She and I are working together to try to get this done. Look forward to a trip to the beach here in a few weeks. So if you follow us on YouTube, you'll be getting a trip to the beach. We're going to go have a look, see what's going on out at a certain cove that got buried by the surf. So I hope everybody has a good day, and thank you very much.